Hey Pokemon Masters, Hypotoria here, and thank goodness for the Pokemon timeline. It's hardly a Legend of Zelda timeline, that's for sure. Thank Arceus. Thanks to clues in the games and tweets that have been put out, we're all pretty on the same page about how the timeline goes. Generation 1 and 3 happen at roughly the same time, followed by Generation 2 and 4, roughly the same time. Then Gen 5, Gen 5.2 with Black and White 2, the sequels. X and Y happen at the same time as that, and then after that you've got your Alola games. All nice and straightforward, right? Hang on a sec. Do we actually know how long there is between each of the games? Oh no. Well, that is the point of today's theory, and this question may have already been answered in a video by my friend Candy. She nicely tells us about the sizes of the gaps between all of the generations, how long they are apart, and it seems to make a lot of sense, for the most part. But sorry to say, Candy is wrong. There is something wrong with her theory. And whoa, before you hate me, Candy is a friend. I spoke to her about this video before I made it. She knows I'm making it. This is not a flame war. It's not Poketuber drama. It's not a fight. Admittedly, Candy would probably win any day of the week. No, we are all good, and I'm actually for this video where I'm re-examining that topic. And I do suggest you watch her video before this one if you want to get like the full picture, but if not, we will try to explain everything here. I'm actually working with someone who worked with her on that theory. And I said it earlier, thank Arceus. It's Almighty Arceus.
Hey Toby and hey Pokemon Masters, my name is Almighty Arceus and I am a Pokemon theorist and remixer. You can tell that me and Birdkeeper Toby both went to the same Pokemon theory school because we both have the same Pokemon theory uniforms. I'm actually doing a few other theories with him over on my channel, such as the theory that Generation 3 doesn't match up with the timeline of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but we'll get to that in a little while. For now, let's get on to this. Well, let's take a look at what we know. First off, we suggest that you watch Candy Eevee's theory video because it gives you a little bit more background and shows you where we're coming from with this theory. But basically the abridged version is that Generations 1 and 3 happen at the same time as each other, and then about 3 years later, Generations 2 and 4 happen at the same time. This is suggested in Generations 2 and 4 because the Lake of Rage is talked about in Sinnoh at the beginning of the games of Diamond and Pearl. And that basically sets up the fact that they're related in time. Perhaps even as close as a few weeks or months apart.
Skipping forward to the Generation 5 games, we know that Black and White and Black and White 2 are about 2 years apart thanks to stuff referenced in the game. And on top of this, we know that X and Y happen at around the same time and that Sun and Moon are about 2 years after that. We know these things because in extra outside game stuff, there's some artwork that shows Grimsley from Pokemon Sun and Moon from Alola being 2 years older than the Grimsley from Black and White 2. And we know that X and Y must happen a few years at least before Sun and Moon, because of Dexio and Cena, who say that you remind them of the kids that they met in Kalos a few years ago. And all in all, this gives us a 7-year timeline. 7 years from Red and Blue to Sun and Moon. Wait a second. Obviously, something wrong here. Red and Blue show up in Sun and Moon, and they are not 17, they are much older. And the observant among you may have realized that we have left a little bit of a gap. What is the time span between Generations 2/4 and Generation 5? Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Gold, Silver, Crystal, to Black and White. What is that time jump? Well, this is where I believe previous explanations have been a little bit wrong.
In her video, she talked about the Team Rocket Grunt from the Cerulean Djinn in Generations 2, who moved over to Unova and lives in Isra City. And he looks like he's living a pretty comfortable life. He's living in a nice house with a wife and a kid. He's balding, so he's obviously lived a really long life at this point. And with this original theory, that puts the Pokemon timeline at about 13 to 14 years in total. And that makes it so that Red and Blue from the original games are about 23 to 25 years old. That is a tad more reasonable, but it doesn't entirely account for all the time that could possibly be there. I mean, obviously you account for getting re-established in Unova, but in that short timeline, that's only about a 5-year gap, and that's kind of a quick turnaround for getting married, having kids, getting a house, and whatever else this person wanted to do. Like, he's balding by the point that this game comes out. That timeline that she's talking about is still possible, but when you factor in the evidence that we're about to talk about, maybe not.
Now, some of you may remember a theory I did a couple of years ago about why Mimikyu looks the way it does, why it has dressed up like Pikachu. According to information officially released on the Pokemon website, it was because it wanted to look like Pikachu because of the rise in popular Pikachu-style merchandise from around 20 years ago. And I believe the Pikachu that made Pikachu so popular around 20 years ago was Red's Pikachu. And yes, Red does have Pikachu, just look at him on Mount Silver, Pikachu is his key Pokemon. Just imagine it, right? This kid out of nowhere, out of Pallet Town, goes across the Kanto region, defeats the Elite Four, defeats an evil team, catches 151 Pokemon, and all the while he's doing it with a Pikachu on his shoulder. Wow, that is some conveniently placed artwork. He does it all. It would become incredibly famous, a meme, it would go viral in the Pokemon world. Heck, that is exactly what happened in 2014 when someone won the World Championships with a Pachirisu, a weak Pokemon. People weren't expecting it, and it allowed that Pokemon to become famous.
If the timeline between Red and Blue and Sun and Moon was about 20 years total, that would suggest that the time jump between generations 2 and 4 and generation 5 is about 13 years total. That seems like a pretty long time, right? And how would that even be possible given the ages of Red and Blue? I mean, are they actually 30? Well, yes, they could. I mean, aging in the Pokemon world is kind of a weird thing anyways, like with Ash and Wally. They definitely have been around for more than 20 years, but they still look super young. So that's already given as it is. Don't agree? Well, let's take a closer look at the aging of Kaitlin. Kaitlin was a character that was originally introduced in Generation 4, specifically in Platinum, and she also appeared in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. She was part of the Battle Frontier facilities, but she wasn't the one who was actually battling. She had her valet battling in her steed because she was like some sort of princess or something along those lines. So she had never battled herself, she just had the valet do the battles for her. Now fast forward to Generation 5 and all of a sudden she's the Unnovan Elite Four. That's gonna take a lot of time to go from having no battle experience to becoming the Elite Four of an entire region. So given that fact, and the fact that Kaitlin also looks substantially aged up between Generations 4 and Generations 5, we can assume that that 13-year time gap isn't really all that unreasonable. It fits in everything we need, including the Team Rocket grunt from Generation 2.
Aha, I hear you say, but what about the Pokemon World Tournament in Black and White 2? Well, I can't be alone in suspecting holograms. Ooh, don't leave. Seriously, holograms in the world of Pokemon. I mean, if Black and White 2 happen at the same time as X and Y, then, well, they've got the Holocaster. And the technology leap between Generations 2/4 and Generation 5 is massive. In Generation 4, you're using the Poketch. It's a watch that's just an LED screen with a touch button. You've got the Pokegear, which is essentially a flip phone. Jump forward to Black and White, and suddenly we're using smartphones in the X transceiver. The technology has gotten so much better by the time we're in the world of Black and White, and it's not unreasonable given the holograms that exist for the Holocaster, the potentially for the biggest tournament in the world, revolving around Pokemon battles, which is like the whole thing that the Pokemon world seems to revolve around, that they would have the best equipment and that they could have those holograms. Holograms of some of the best trainers from across the world of Pokemon. If you don't believe me, you think, no, that's really them, and there's a continuity error here as to why all these characters look the same ages as their previous appearances, then I do have to question the logic a little bit. Of Giovanni, a mob boss on the run from the police, the champion of the Pokemon world in Red, and all the other gym leaders who are mayors and important people in their own towns, suddenly just like, yeah, we can take 10 minutes off to come do a tournament. No, of course that wouldn't happen.
But look, if that's not enough for you, well, maybe we've been toying with you the entire time because we actually have an almost indisputable piece of evidence that confirms this 20-year timeline. Want to know what that is? Porygon. Porygon's Dex entry in Fire Red said that it came from the latest technologies of the time. Of course, that being set in Kanto means it's set around this 1996 era, and it's made from the latest technologies. However, by Generation 7 in Pokemon Sun and Moon, it says that it was created by technologies, and I quote, 20 years ago. So that indisputably proves that there is a 20-year time gap between Generations 1 and Generation 7. This confirms a 20-year timeline, and with all the information that we know, the only gap that's missing is the gap between Generations 4 and 5, which we've already exposed to be a healthy 13 years. The interesting thing about this is that it practically matches our own timeline. I mean, Red is seen in Pokemon Sun and Moon wearing a shirt that says 96, which stands for 1996, the year that the original games came out. There's also references to other real-world events, such as in Fire Red and Leaf Green, it talks about the rocket launch in 1969, the first time we put a man on the moon. So referencing that real world event places that game within a certain timeline, and makes sense that it's kind of paralleling our own. 1996 was the release of Generation 1 games, and then 3 years later, Generation 2 came out. For some reason, Generations 3 and 4 were made in parallel with that timeline, but then you jump forward 11 years, in our actual timeline and get to Pokemon Black and White. Then in 2012, you have Black and White 2, 2013 has X and Y, and finally in 2016, there is Sun and Moon. While it's not an exact one-to-one match, we can see that the Pokemon World's timeline and our own timeline are about parallel. Does that mean we're inside an ultra wormhole in some of their other alternate dimensions? Who knows? Maybe we just didn't end up lucky enough to get Pokemon in real life.
Now, we know that Diamond and Pearl don't happen at the exact same time as Gold and Silver. For example, Jasmine shows up in Sinnoh in Sunny Shore City, and yet clearly she's running the gym in the Johto games. So we know there's got to be a small difference in time, whether it's a few weeks, a few months. But the point is, we know they happen at around the same time. So approximately a 20-year timeline is the timeline that makes the most sense to me. That said, there is one problem with all of this, and I can see you reaching for the keyboard to type it. Wally. Where's Wally? Where's Wally? Wally! Oh, this character is so frustrating because he doesn't age when he clearly should. There might be an explanation though to do with his illness, or just the fact that people don't seem to age in the world of Pokemon. I'm looking at you, Ash. Or there is another explanation, and that is that Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which is the Wally that shows up in Sun and Moon, that timeline, the Mega timeline, that actually happens a little bit later on. Now personally, I find that idea absolutely ridiculous, but the more me and Almighty Arceus looked into it, well, he's actually managed to convince me, and that's with the theory that we've made over on his channel, so I'm gonna go check it out, and I suggest you two too.
Well, thanks so much, Toby, for having me, and make sure you check out the other theories on my channel. I'm Almighty Arceus, and thanks so much for watching.
So hi, Pokemon Masters. Using the links below, sign up to Patreon today to get merch, Pokemon cards, shoutouts. A special thank you goes to the patrons who made 3 videos a week possible, especially the Poke Myth of the Month. Jessica Mather, thank you so much.